Sarah had no idea that one ordinary day at work would change her life forever. She walked into her shift just like any other, tired, overworked, and struggling to make ends meet. But what she didn't know was that someone important was watching her every move. A billionaire, sitting quietly in the corner of the diner, saw something in Sarah that no one else noticed. He watched as she handled a rude customer with grace, as she gave away part of her own meal to a homeless man, and as she held back tears while checking her phone. Another unpaid bill, another reminder of her struggles. That billionaire made a decision in that moment, one that would change Sarah's future forever. But she had no idea what was coming. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? Comment below, and if you love stories about unexpected life-changing moments, hit the like button and subscribe. Because this story, you won't believe what happens next. Sarah sighed as she slipped her phone back into her apron pocket, forcing a smile as she wiped down a table. Another overdue bill, another reminder that she was barely staying afloat. She had no time to dwell on it. Her shift at the Maplewood Diner had just started, and there was work to do. The small-town diner had been around for decades, a cozy little place with worn-out booths, the smell of fresh coffee in the air, and a jukebox in the corner that rarely worked. It was the kind of place where regulars came every morning, where tips were unpredictable, and where dreams often stayed just that, dreams. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, and the hum of conversation mixed with the clatter of plates in the kitchen. Sarah was only 25, but life had aged her in ways people couldn't see. Her tired eyes and calloused hands were proof of the long shifts, the sleepless nights, and the weight of responsibilities that never seemed to end. She had been raising her little brother, Jake, ever since their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. Working 2 jobs, sacrificing her own dreams, none of it mattered as long as Jake had a future. Yet, despite everything, Sarah never let her struggles turn her cold. She greeted every customer with warmth. She never complained, and she always found a way to help others, even when she had nothing to give. In the farthest booth, near the window, where the rain gently tapped against the glass, Mark Reynolds sat quietly, stirring his coffee. He was a man in his 50s, dressed simply in a dark sweater and jeans, blending in as just another customer. But beneath the modest appearance was a billionaire businessman, a self-made man who had once known struggle just like Sarah's. Mark watched, unnoticed, as Sarah moved from table to table. He saw the genuine kindness in her eyes, the way she went out of her way to make sure an elderly couple was comfortable, how she laughed softly while serving a child a milkshake, despite her exhaustion. He saw the moment her smile faltered when she checked her phone, though she quickly hid it behind her usual professionalism. Then something caught his attention. A well-dressed man at the counter, tapping his fingers impatiently on the table, narrowed his eyes at Sarah as she approached. "Took you long enough," he snapped, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Sarah remained composed, her polite smile never wavering. "I'm so sorry for the wait, sir. What can I get for you?" The man scoffed, rolling his eyes. "Unbelievable. I don't know why places like this keep hiring people like you. Slow, careless, and lucky to even have a job." A few customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The kitchen grew quiet. Sarah felt the sting of his words but didn't let it show. She simply nodded. "I'll make sure to get your order out as quickly as possible, sir." Mark's grip tightened around his coffee cup. He had seen enough. Sarah had no idea, but her life was about to change. Sarah could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, but she didn't react. Years of working in customer service had taught her one thing: never let them see they've hurt you. She simply nodded, turned on her heels, and walked toward the kitchen to put in the man's order. Mark Reynolds watched the entire interaction from his booth. He had been in countless high-end restaurants and luxury hotels, but it was always in places like this, small, quiet diners run by hardworking people, that he saw the real strength in others. And Sarah? She was holding back pain that most wouldn't understand. The man at the counter, still unsatisfied, shook his head and laughed under his breath. "These places hire just anyone these days," he muttered, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. One of the older regulars, a man who had known Sarah for years, spoke up. "You know, son, you don't have to eat here if you don't like the service," the rude customer scoffed. "Right. Like I should care what a bunch of nobodies think." Sarah returned with a glass of water, setting it down gently in front of him. "Your food will be ready soon, sir." He didn't thank her. Instead, he reached for the glass too quickly, knocking it over, spilling water all over himself. A moment of silence filled the diner. The man's eyes flared with anger and humiliation. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted. "You did that on purpose?" Sarah shook her head instantly, panic flashing in her eyes. "No, sir, Before she could finish, the diner's manager rushed over, already looking exhausted. "What's going on here?" The man pointed at Sarah, his voice dripping with entitlement. "She just threw water all over me. Completely unprofessional. This is why you don't hire people who don't know what they're doing." A few of the regulars started speaking up in Sarah's defense, but the manager raised a hand, silencing them. He looked at Sarah with a tired expression. "Sarah, we can't keep having complaints like this." Her stomach twisted. "But I didn't." The manager sighed. "Just apologize and take a break." Sarah felt the words hit her like a slap to the face. She had done nothing wrong, but she had no choice. She swallowed the lump in her throat and nodded. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir." The man smirked, satisfied, and went back to looking at his phone. Mark's fingers tightened around his coffee mug. This wasn't just about a spilled drink. This was about power, about the way some people used their privilege to bring others down. And Mark had spent too many years fighting to earn his place in the world to sit by and watch someone else get stepped on. Sarah, meanwhile, stepped outside the diner's back door, taking a shaky breath. The cold air hit her face, and she tried to compose herself. She pulled out her phone again, another bill reminder. Another weight on her shoulders. She wanted to scream. Instead, she wiped her eyes quickly, straightened her apron, and prepared to go back inside. But before she could reach for the door handle, a deep, steady voice spoke behind her. "You didn't deserve that." Sarah turned sharply, startled. Mark stood there, his hands in his coat pockets, his expression unreadable. "I saw what happened," he continued, his voice calm but firm, "and that wasn't right." Sarah forced a smile, shaking her head. "It's just part of the job. I'm used to it." Mark didn't smile back. Instead, he studied her for a long moment. "That's the problem," he said quietly. "You shouldn't have to be." Sarah frowned slightly, not sure what to say. Why was this stranger so concerned? Before she could ask, Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out a card, holding it out to her. "Come to this address tomorrow," he said simply. "No questions, just trust me." Sarah hesitated, staring at the card. She had no idea that accepting it would change her life forever. Sarah stood there, staring at the card in her hand. The address was printed in elegant gold lettering, but there was no company name, no explanation, just a location. She glanced up at the man who had handed it to her, Mark Reynolds, the stranger from the diner. "Why?" she asked, confusion flickering across her tired eyes. Mark smiled slightly. "Because I believe in people who don't give up, even when the world gives them every reason to." Sarah let out a small, nervous laugh, shaking her head. "That's nice and all, but I don't know you. How do I know this isn't some kind of scam?" Mark chuckled, his expression calm and knowing. "You don't, but if you don't take a chance on yourself, who will?" Sarah hesitated, staring down at the card again. A part of her wanted to throw it away. Life had taught her that nothing good ever came easy. But another part, a small part, whispered, "What if this is real?" The next morning, despite every doubt in her mind, Sarah found herself standing in front of a massive glass skyscraper in the heart of the city, the same address from the card. She checked it again, as if expecting it to change, but it was still there. This was real. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The lobby was nothing like she had ever seen before. Marble floors, high ceilings, chandeliers sparkling like stars. People in expensive suits walked with purpose, and the scent of fresh coffee and polished wood filled the air. A receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "Miss Miller?" Sarah blinked. Yes?" "Right this way. Mr. Reynolds is expecting you." Her heart pounded as she followed the woman down a sleek hallway. The walls were lined with framed newspaper articles, each one featuring a photo of Mark Reynolds, business deals, charity events, success stories. It hit her like a ton of bricks. The man from the diner wasn't just some rich guy. He was a billionaire, a self-made one. Before she could process that thought, the doors to an enormous office swung open. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, and sitting at an expensive mahogany desk was Mark Reynolds himself, looking completely at ease. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway. You own all this?" Mark grinned. "Well, I don't make the coffee, if that's what you're asking." Sarah let out a small laugh, but her mind was spinning. "What is this? Why am I here?" Mark leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "I watched you yesterday, Sarah. Not just how hard you work, but how you treat people, even when they don't deserve kindness. That kind of heart? It's rare." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Mark continued. "I started just like you know. Broke, struggling, working a job where people treated me like I was invisible. And then, one day, someone gave me a chance. It changed everything." Sarah stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "Are you offering me a job?" Mark smiled. "Not just a job, an opportunity. I want to put you through business school, full scholarship. And when you graduate, I want you to come work for me, at any position you choose." Sarah's breath hitched. This had to be a joke. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like her. She shook her head, laughing nervously. "You don't even know me." Mark's eyes softened. "I know enough. I know that you get up every day and fight for something bigger than yourself. I know you take care of your little brother. I know you've sacrificed more than most, and you never ask for anything in return. That's the kind of person I want in my company." Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped the chair in front of her. It was too much, too unbelievable. "What if I fail?" she whispered. Mark's smile didn't waver. "Then you try again." Sarah exhaled, feeling like she might collapse under the weight of it all. Her entire life, she had fought just to survive. And now, someone was offering her a chance to actually live. She looked up at Mark, eyes filled with something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. And in that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Was this really happening? Was she standing in the office of a billionaire, being offered an opportunity most people could only dream of? She looked at Mark, still struggling to find her voice. "Why me?" she finally asked. Mark leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Because I see myself in you." Sarah frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Mark exhaled, tapping his fingers on the desk. "I never told you how I started, did I?" He gestured for her to sit, and as she did, he continued. I grew up with nothing, he said. Single mom, worked 2 jobs. I started off washing dishes in a restaurant, just like that diner you work at. The owner used to yell at me every day. Customers treated me like I was invisible. But one day, a man came in. A man who saw potential in me when I didn't see it in myself. He gave me a chance. He paid for my first semester of college, told me to prove myself. I never looked back. Sarah sat in stunned silence. She had never imagined that someone as powerful as Mark Reynolds had once been in her shoes. And now, Mark said, smiling, I get to do the same for someone else. Sarah swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Mark replied simply. Sarah let out a nervous laugh, still trying to wrap her head around everything. You're just willing to help a total stranger. Mark shook his head. You were never a stranger. I know who you are, Sarah. I've been coming to that diner for months, watching how you handle yourself. You never complain, never give up, and you always put others before yourself. That's rare. That's the kind of person who deserves a chance. Sarah's heart pounded. He had been watching her all this time, not in a creepy way, but in a way that meant he truly saw her. He had seen her struggles, her sacrifices, the way she fought for a better life, and now he was giving her a way out. But what if I don't deserve it? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark's expression turned serious. Sarah, listen to me. People like us, we spend so much time just trying to survive that we forget what it means to dream. You deserve this. You always have. Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. No one had ever said that to her before. No one had ever looked at her and seen more than just a struggling waitress trying to get by. She glanced down at the business card still clutched in her hand. Just yesterday, she had been wiping down tables, dodging rude customers, and worrying about paying rent. Now, she was being offered a full scholarship, a future, a new life. Her entire world had just shifted. Taking a shaky breath, she looked up at Mark. Okay, she said. I'll do it. Mark's face broke into a wide smile. Good, because I already have your first semester paid for. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. You already? Mark chuckled. I had a feeling you'd say yes. Sarah couldn't believe it. She had spent years feeling invisible, unimportant, stuck in a cycle she thought she could never escape. But now, for the first time in a long time, she saw a way forward. And it was all because someone had seen her. Truly seen her. She had no idea how much her life was about to change. Sarah still couldn't believe it. Just 24 hours ago, she had been stuck in the same routine, working long shifts, struggling to make ends meet, wondering if things would ever change. And now, she was standing in the office of a billionaire who had just given her the opportunity of a lifetime. She looked down at the paperwork in front of her. A full scholarship to a top business school, a guaranteed job waiting for her upon graduation, and a financial safety net for her little brother, Jake. It didn't feel real. It felt like something out of a movie. Mark watched her carefully, noticing the way her fingers hesitated over the documents. You're still doubting yourself, he said knowingly. Sarah bit her lip. It's just, I've spent so long fighting for everything. Having someone just hand me an opportunity like this. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like I earned it. Mark leaned forward, his expression warm yet firm. Sarah, you earned this the moment you refused to let life break you. You could have given up a long time ago, but you didn't. You fought. You survived. That's why you're here. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever seen her struggles as anything more than just bad luck or misfortune. But Mark, he understood. He had been there. She took a deep breath and finally picked up the pen. With one final glance at Mark, she signed her name at the bottom of the page. It was official. Her life was about to change forever. Sarah adjusted the strap of her messenger bag as she walked into the gleaming headquarters of Reynolds Enterprises. It was still hard to believe that this was her life now. A year ago, she had been serving coffee and wiping down tables. Now, she was a top-performing business student with a paid internship at one of the biggest companies in the country. Her little brother, Jake, was thriving in school, no longer worried about whether they could afford groceries or rent. They had moved into a better apartment, and for the first time in years, Sarah didn't wake up every morning with fear in her chest. She had spent the past year learning everything she could, determined to prove to herself and to Mark that she deserved this chance. And today, she was finally stepping into his office not as a struggling waitress, but as a future business leader. When she reached his office, Mark looked up from his desk and grinned. "You're early." Sarah smiled back. "I wasn't going to be late for this." Mark leaned back in his chair, studying her for a moment. "You've come a long way." Sarah nodded. "I have. And I have you to thank for that." Mark shook his head. "Number, all I did was open a door. You walked through it." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. He was right. No one had handed her success. She had fought for it, worked for it, and proved to herself that she was capable of so much more than she ever thought. She took a deep breath. "You changed my life, Mark. And I want to do the same for someone else." Mark's expression softened. "I was hoping you'd say that." He slid a folder across the desk. "We're starting a mentorship program, helping people who were in the same position you were in. People with talent, drive, and heart, but no opportunity. I want you to be part of it." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the folder. She had dreamed of making a difference, of giving back, of making sure no one else had to struggle the way she had. And now, she had the power to do exactly that. She looked up at Mark and smiled. "Let's do it." As Sarah held the folder in her hands, she realized something important. Her story wasn't just about her anymore. She had come a long way from being the struggling waitress in a small-town diner, but now she had the power to help others who were just like her. She looked at Mark and smiled. "I won't waste this opportunity." Mark nodded. "I know you won't." Sarah took a deep breath, feeling something she hadn't in years, complete certainty about her future. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And now, it was her turn to pay it forward. What would you do if someone changed your life forever? Would you take the opportunity and run with it? Or would doubt hold you back? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you love stories about hope, kindness, and life-changing moments, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more inspiring content. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person believing in you to change everything. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay kind, and never stop believing in yourself.